Ugh. Welcome to Dangerous Policy.
Channel Angel of Intelligent People, where we discuss important issues facing life and society.
My name is Crispin.
And I'm Charlene. And I don't know.
So we have been put into lockdown, and for not very many cases, it has to be said. And we are now having to wear masks whenever we're in public. Now, for the first time so far in the pandemic, I've really begun to understand the issues that people have. When you're not exposed to having to wear a mask all the time, we're seeing people complain about masks, people who get upset about them. You're like, oh, look, aren't you overreacting? It's just a mask. It might help, blah, blah, blah.
Mm.
But now that you're in that situation and you actually understand how obstructive these things are to human interaction, to your own airways, the amount of carbon dioxide you're tending to breathe, and
sweaty.
And particularly within like our own city, which doesn't have much disease, it really does seem like overkill. I mean, my own view is that hand washing is really important, social distancing is really important, and that this is more performance art. This is about sort of virtue signaling, showing to the rest of the world that you're a good person because you're doing your bit. People don't see you sort of hand wash. They don't see you doing a lot of these kinds of careful things, but they do see you wearing a mask. And so
I do want to know like the effectiveness of wearing a mask and preventing spread of disease. Like, I'm sure that it's more obvious for places where they have more cases.
Well, I mean, we have to be careful on YouTube what we say about this, because the advice does continue to change. And I'm not sure that even if the advice was to change again, whether or not retrospectively we might get in trouble if what we say, even if it was true today, would be out of date in the future. So we'll just let that go with it, sort of a no comment. Check your advice, check your government kind of things. But what I can say is the reason why surgeons wear these masks is to prevent their kind of saliva and their breath and things entering the patient who might be, open wound, and you might contaminate them in some way. So it's not about preventing them from receiving potential pathogens from outside. It's to prevent them sharing it with others. So what impact that has as an individual wearing a mask, that's for professional medical advice, but it is much more annoying than I expected.
Yeah. And I know like in Asian culture in general, like if you're sick and they have to go to work, they always wear a mask. Like it's actually, for some countries, it's so perfectly normal.
That's true. I mean, you walk all over Korea and places like that, and everyone was wearing a mask even before any of this happened, and you just that you would be the weird Westerner who didn't, but now everybody does it. I didn't really understand it back then either. I always thought that it was more about air pollution, that like in a lot of these rapidly industrializing Asian economies where you just don't see the sun because there's so much carbon dioxide being pumped into the atmosphere, that people wore a mask just because the air like smelt terrible and you couldn't breathe properly. I don't know, maybe it's that, or maybe it was just the fear of disease.
No,
sure.
Definitely just passing sickness. They don't want to pass it on to others. That's generally.
Well, that'd be an interesting study. What's the rate of flu transmission in countries that had high mask sort of wearing before the pandemic hit? Was it affected in any way? I don't know the answer to that.
And like things I do appreciate of Asian culture is like, there's no like kissing or hugging, like that's not a thing. And I'm so happy that for COVID we don't have to do that. Like it's not culturally,
That'll be news to your boyfriend.
No, but you know what I mean? Like I don't know about how Westerners like greet each other.
Get away from me!
So stay away. I like my bubble. So this week, we covered a lot of topics, and one of them really interested me was Biden has finally talked about his position in terms of international policies. And what I got from the video is that basically nothing is new. In fact, it was kind of rolling back on what the progress Trump has made during his presidency.
Yeah, that'd be my position. The US president has one area of policy that is entirely his domain or her domain, and that is foreign affairs. So the American system is broken up where you've got the legislature, the Congress, that does basically everything that is domestic in the United States is a congressional thing, right? The president can, sponsor, new legislation and can kind of, be a public advocate for it, but it's the Congress that makes these things happen. In the foreign affairs sphere,
isn't it always executive orders?
No, like treaties have to go through Congress and things like that. So a lot, even in foreign affairs, there are things that need to go through Congress.
Yeah.
For example, famously, Woodrow Wilson, the president of the United States, during the First World War, wanted to join the League of Nations, the sort of precursor to the United Nations. He was the sponsor of it. He kind of helped bring it all together. He got all these other countries on board, but then he wasn't able to get his own Congress to sign up to it. So there are those famous cases where the Congress does block things that the president tries to do in the foreign affairs sphere. But generally speaking, the president has enormous power to shape American foreign policy, invested in his own office. He's the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. And although technically only Congress can declare war, the president can, maintain military operations on his own for a long period of time, and in practice will get money from Congress for a lot of this stuff. So the foreign affairs sphere is dominated by the president. The Secretary of State, the Department of State, so all the diplomats, they answer to the executive, which is the president's office. So he sits at the pyramid of all American foreign policy kind of ideas. And the first thing he did was to get up and apologize to the Trump years, effectively saying, America has been lost, and now America is back. That was the key message he was trying to get across. But there's a philosophical kind of thing at the heart of all this. Like I went through all the issues I had with it in the video, but philosophically, there is a belief that US allies, are the most important thing that America has. That it's so-called soft power, which, as I've said many times, doesn't exist, but so-called soft power allows to project influence on these like-minded Western allies, and then as a collective they can work together to meet shared challenges and overcome and marginalize potential adversaries. And that's Biden's philosophy. That was Obama's philosophy. It's a philosophy of American liberal internationalists for decades.
Okay.
Trump is a realist. And realists believe that the thing that defines the international system is power and influence. That there is no higher authority than the nation state. So, you can't appeal to the police force of Interpol or anything like that. You just have to appeal to your government. And if your government can achieve things for you in the world, then that is it achieving in spite of, not because of, global governance and global systems. And so, yes, allies can be helpful for US foreign policy, but that is a means and not an end in itself, right? So you only have an alliance because it assists you achieve some other foreign policy goal.
What are many alliances are military or trade or all the same?
Well, all alliances, capital A, are military alliances, i.e., and what an alliance is an agreement to go to war under certain circumstances, right? So, and so you say, okay, well, I'm allied between the United States and Australia. The ANZUS Treaty says that if any of the assets are attacked in the Asian region or a metropolitan centre, they will work together to meet the common danger through their own constitutional processes. I believe that's probably word for word. It's only been invoked once in the entire kind of 60, almost 70-year history of the ANZUS Alliance. And that is when September 11 happened. Australia invoked it to support the United States. So there is these military alliances all over the place.
Yeah.
But whether it's a benefit or a hindrance really depends on how the alliance operates. So, for example, the European countries, many of them, see their alliance with the United States as an excuse not to spend any money on their own defense. They say, okay, well, I have an alliance with the most powerful military country in the world. Why would I bother investing all my blood and treasure into building up a large military when the Americans can fight on my behalf, right?
Yeah.
And so President Trump was having none of that. He was saying, look, if you want America to support you, you have to show that you're supporting yourself, okay?
Yeah.
You can't just expect, all the Americans to die for you. You need to be able to show that there's someone genuine who is going to be fighting alongside one another. And so for all of the criticism of Trump, he did help build up NATO. NATO countries did start spending a lot more money on their own defense because that was an expectation in the United States. And he didn't draw down from the areas of strategic importance in Europe. Like he supported the sale of weapons to Ukraine, something that Obama absolutely refused to do during his entire term of office. So all of the talk of, Trump like sucking up to Vladimir Putin, I mean, that was something that Putin absolutely loathed, was that Trump was arming Putin's Ukrainian enemies. And then he increased his deployments in the Baltic states, which helps to contain the expansion of Russia. So for all the criticisms of Trump, his practical achievements far outstrip them. And what Biden is showing, as did Obama, is that the perception of people liking America is more important than America's national interest. And this is something
that's so fluffy.
Well, it speaks to the elites. Okay, so in the United States, there is a foreign policy class.
Yeah.
People who are career diplomats, think tanks, sponsored by various military lobbyists. There's an entire group of people, of which I was embarrassingly a member at one point, where they kind of they have this global thing where they go from conference to conference, talk about different issues, use all the latest buzzwords in foreign policy circles, and often look down on the average taxpayer with considerable disdain. Like they get well, because they think that American working class is kind of backward. That they're very globalist in their outlook. They believe in global governance. They believe in foreign interventionism wherever that happens to be. They believe in American exceptionalism and little constraints on their own power. So there is a certain contempt you have to have for an American taxpayer if you're going to turn around to the Americans and say, okay, it's costing us billions of dollars a year to keep 35,000 troops in Germany, and you American taxpayers are going to be paying for that. But it supports our alliances with Germany. It makes us more, prestigious on the world stage. Yes, it benefits you not at all, but it benefits us because it gives us influence in these international fora. So there is the American foreign policy establishment promotes policies, no matter how disastrous or counter to American national interest, based upon what they see as beneficial to them. There's also a lack of understanding between ends and means. So and the Republicans are just as guilty of this, where they think that they should increase deployments everywhere, that they should increase commitments everywhere, that they should surge. But there's a wonderful little joke chart that I saw of okay, there's a problem in, this part of the world. Are there American troops there? No, send. Yes, surge. There is an American military-industrial complex that is heavily invested in, foreign conflict abroad. This was something that Eisenhower famously warned against when he left office as president in the 1950s. So President Eisenhower, of course, he used to be General Eisenhower. He led the D-Day invasions, a product of the military-industrial complex if you'd ever seen one. But as he left office, and we'll leave a link in the description below, he gave a dire warning in his final speech about how the US military-industrial complex had become so large and so influential through its lobbying, through its think tanks, through its other organizations in Washington, that it could really run American foreign policy without the consultation of the American people. So there's there is a whole class that have benefited under the Obama years, who benefited under the Clinton years, who expected to benefit under Hillary Clinton and thought that she was going to be elected. And when Trump was elected, there was no group in Washington that experienced more horror than the foreign policy establishment when Trump said, no, we're not interested in massive foreign wars constantly abroad. He was the first president in decades not to start any new wars. And he said, yeah, American ends have to justify the means that we do in their support. So there has to be strategy. There has to be, we're a nation state. We're not this universal idea. We are a country, and the country needs to meet its own national security interests, just like every other country. And this tied in with Trump's broader philosophy about fair trade. So he was concerned about the trade imbalances that America had with China, with Mexico, with Canada. He was concerned about these waves of migration that were happening into the United States, all this illegal immigration that was coming into the United States. So Trump was interested in fair go for the American people, strong borders, foreign policy that didn't just embroil America in all these quagmires and foreign wars and getting involved in other people's business. And he wanted allies to pay their fair share for their own national security. So all of these things were totally reasonable. And then on top of that, he adds a significant number of foreign policy achievements, namely peace in Kosovo between Serbia and Kosovo, something wasn't thought possible. And then these peace treaties between Israel, the UAE, Morocco, and warming relations with Saudi Arabia and so on. So it's Bahrain. So there's this kind of incredibly unfair narrative that is being spread about Donald Trump. It's been spread by those that did not benefit under his leadership. The ones that lost out were the elites. It was the mainstream media. It was these foreign policy think tanks. It was these lobby groups. Trump came to office with...
I've just completely missed the mark. How do they benefit? How do these elites benefit off having fluffy foreign relations?
Okay, so...
Don't help the American people, because that just seems a bit backwards, but...
So what you have to understand, these people are in an ivory tower. Okay? There's a class of foreign policy elites that are made up of diplomats, think tank pundits, media talking heads, lobby groups. And what happens is they get all these they have a conference circuit. They're always on planes. They're going from...
Terrible for global warming. Keep going.
There's that. But they're constantly at conferences, at panels. They're meeting the same groups of people all of the time. They're talking about how important each other are and the latest projects that they're doing. And this is all paid for by the American taxpayer, right? Like they're in the elite class of American society. And they see, when they go overseas, they want everyone to talk about how great America is and how wonderful it is that America is supporting them in all these different ways. And they were desperately embarrassed by the election of Donald Trump. Donald Trump certainly wasn't the popular president around the world. Not like Obama. People were coming out in the streets kind of worshipping Obama all over the world. And going from that, where Americans, being an American abroad seemed like a really prestigious thing, and they could go and speak on behalf of this great, amazing administration, irrespective of how unsuccessful the policies were, which they were terribly unsuccessful. You had the Arab Spring, you had the surrendering of sanctions into the Iranian nuclear deal, you had the reset with Russia that totally failed, you had the pivot to Asia that completely unraveled. So nothing Obama ever did overseas was ever successful. But what they did have was a lot of smiles. Okay, they had a lot of people going, "Yeah, we love America, we love the American government, blah blah." And under Trump, they're like, "Oh, it's a nightmare." So these American elites, and also Trump, unlike a lot of these other political figures and the corruption that exists at the heart of particularly the Democratic Party, is that Trump came to office with no political debts. Like, he didn't owe anyone anything. He fought the entire Republican establishment to become president in the first place. And then he could come to office with a mandate to do whatever he wanted to do. And he was like, okay, well, we're not going to spend huge amounts of money on things that have no benefit to the United States or the American taxpayer. He moved, for example, the embassy in Tel Aviv to Jerusalem at a fraction of the cost that had been quoted to him. So he actually really cared about this. He also really cared about deadlines and things like that. And he wanted government to work. Now, his problem is that he didn't have any experience running government. Yeah. And he had a large number of people who were insiders who started to work for him who did not have his own agenda at heart. They tried to manage Trump. They tried to prevent Trump from acting out his policies, and they were largely obstructions to him. So he would have really benefited if he had more people in his inner circle who knew government but also believed in what he was doing. And he just didn't have that. He just had these people that were legacy insiders who wanted to continue with the status quo. And that's the problem with the American elite. They're only interested in the status quo. They don't see how they are sacrificing American foreign policy and national security interests, huge amounts of blood and treasure, on things that are totally wasteful, antithetical to America's long-term strategic interest and the interest of the American worker who has to pay for it. So Trump had a great foreign policy, and I'll always defend it. Like, people will criticize Trump, they hate Trump, whatever, they don't like his tweets, that's fine. But I think that Trump was a fantastic foreign policy president who has real achievements that he can look back on. And that was because, principally, he didn't see America as an idea. He saw America as a country with resources that could be allocated to a narrow area of strategic interest, interests that should be prioritized. And at the top of that list was China. And the biggest foreign policy success of Donald Trump was to reorient the American political establishment away from the Middle East and towards China. And that's something that, at least to an extent, is a legacy that has outlasted him.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, the Biden presidency does seem to be a walk back to the status quo, like of, elites spending money like a wounded bull, a lot of fluffy conferences with European allies
that makes me angry.
Not really achieving anything, allowing the other allies to freeload on the American taxpayer, potentially some foreign interventions in the Middle East. I mean, it's gonna. Biden's administration, I have very low expectations of. I mean, you had Hillary Clinton, who was probably the worst Secretary of State ever. She wanted to support what became ISIS in the military uprisings in the Middle East against Syria. You had the Libya catastrophe, where the Obama administration swore black and blue to Russia that it wasn't about overthrowing the government of Libya, and yet immediately did that. And then they lost all their diplomats, including the ambassador in Benghazi, when they were killed by Islamic militants. Islamic militants took over Libya. Libya became a failed state. Like, there just isn't any positives to speak to the entire American foreign policy decision-making for the last 25 years. Like, the last time America did anything sensible possibly was limiting the military intervention in Kosovo in the late 90s. Was probably the last time, like, the American foreign policy elites showed some foresight. Probably just like not eliminating Saddam Hussein in the 90s and allowing him to remain as a bulwark against Iranian expansion. It's probably the last competent decision that had been made. And after that, you've got the Iraq War. You've got all of the things I've just listed. So the American foreign policy establishment has been an absolute catastrophe. There's been no accountability. And that's another big problem with the American foreign policy elite, is that the one unwritten rule, the reason why I'm not a member of that illustrious group anymore, like I could be in a think tank in the US right now, working in some little office somewhere, doing something, self-important but irrelevant. The one unwritten rule in this cabal is that you don't criticize other insiders. Okay, so if you're it's true. Like,
well, that sucks.
And I'm not the only one to say this. Stephen Walt, who's a realist at Harvard University, has made this point very clear. Now, I disagree with Stephen on the whole, right? He was very critical of Trump, and for reasons that were absolutely foul. Like he knows perfectly well that Trump is a great realist and has achieved really good things. But Stephen Walt, even he is afraid of being criticized by his own insider cabal, but he has made the observation that the one rule of being an insider in the Western liberal elite is that you don't criticize others. So if you are on one side of the political spectrum, that's fine. You just don't criticize the person on the other side of the spectrum. You might not talk about them. You might point to some other kind of deflection if you're asked.
So they're not challenged?
They're not challenged, and there's no accountability. Like Samantha Power has been reappointed a secretary level position, I think for aid or something, in the Biden administration. Samantha Power was Obama's UN ambassador, and after she left the Obama government, had a nice cushy posting at the Kennedy School of Harvard School of Public Policy. Well, Samantha Power is responsible for Libya. Like she is. She's 100% responsible. She's responsible for the intervention. She's responsible for exceeding the bounds of the agreement that they had struck with Russia. She's responsible for Gaddafi's death. She's responsible for what happened in Benghazi. And she's responsible for Libya being a failed state. She has never been held accountable for any of those disastrous, catastrophic decisions. And as a consequence, but she's recycled because she has a good resume, right? She's had these high-level positions. And, as a consequence of that, she's been recycled back into the Biden administration. And you see this happen over and over and over again with all different kinds of failed individuals. The one thing that you could say for Trump is he did actually hold people accountable. And if people failed, that was the consequence of you. Yeah. As you should be, right? Like,
yes.
So people managed to obfuscate catastrophic idiocy that has cost America dearly because of good resumes, good connections, and a culture of protection among the elites. And one thing that I really love about social media, although YouTube and others are trying to crack down on it, one thing I love about social media is it does allow ordinary people to call that out. And one of the things that catapulted Trump to prominence was how fed up people were with this problem.
So then, okay.
I mean, what there is the one hope that I have for Biden's foreign policy is Jake Sullivan. Jake Sullivan is Biden's national security advisor, and Jake Sullivan was probably the only Democrat after the Trump victory not to go Russia, Russia, Russia. He was like, you know what? I think we missed something. And I think that the Americans weren't particularly enamored by our foreign policy failures, and that we did need to think more about means and ends, and that the election of Donald Trump was a message being sent to the foreign policy elite from the electorate. And he actually had a period of self-reflection. I remember this in 2016-17, where he actually talked about this. And so Sullivan, and this was years before Jake Sullivan ever thought he'd be catapulted back into public view.
Yeah.
So I think his reflection there was probably genuine, and he did not jump on the bandwagon of everyone being like, "Oh, it was a Russian conspiracy."
Okay, I want to change topic. I just feel like you could go on and on and on about you, Biden, and although I do, in the back of my mind, I'm like, we'll have to see. We'll have to see, because there obviously is a reason why the American people voted for him. They obviously, I have an opinion that they wanted somebody that looks more presidential, despite,
Yeah, Biden wasn't on the ballot. There was just Donald Trump and not Trump.
Yeah, that's true.
So now people have to accept what's happened. There was for example, and Biden's already lied about a few things. For example, he promised everyone a $2,000 stimulus check. That has been dropped to $1,400 maybe. There was the Keystone Pipeline, which he promised to continue. He's already pulled that.
Yeah, he has pulled that.
Thousands of union jobs being completely annihilated overnight. And thus, people are starting to realize that, okay, not Trump. Yeah, it's not Trump. There are things worse than Trump. And we will see. Yeah, hypocrites and liars. And Trump okay, Trump was certainly braggadocious and he would exaggerate and so on, but he was sincere. He wasn't truthful, but he was sincere. Whereas Biden is just this vacuous old man who does whatever his earpiece tells him to. But let's change topic because
let's change topic.
We've got 4 years to talk about Biden, sadly. Well, more like a year, and then he'll get knifed by Kamala Harris.
Oh yeah, you reckon? Well, I don't know if anybody's even going to talk about US politics anymore. I don't know. I haven't followed it as much as I have before.
Yeah, and that's
good reason.
It's one of those. Actually, I think that would have been what most Americans really want, is like not for Trump to be voted out, but just for Trump to be voted silent for a year, like just so people could have a bit of a break. That's I think what people, if that was on the ballot, be like keep Trump president but shut him up for a year. Yeah, people would be like, oh yeah, we need that.
No, fair enough. Okay, you also talked about a weird topic: women's fertility. As a white male, shares to the internet that you're concerned that women over the age of 30 struggle to have children conceived because women are becoming more educated and there's just less eligible men around, essentially.
So this is all predicated on two phenomena. First is women delaying having children. Okay, so obviously the median age for women having children is getting higher and higher and higher in the West. And there is a upper limit to that. Like you can't just keep going up forever. And the other is that women have, as I said in the video, been trained to marry up. And we've not reconciled the fact that women, that is predicated on the fact that all men have high status, right? Let's say, like if you're in a society where only men work and men have all the accolades and achievements in life, okay, there are massive drawbacks to that, and it's good that we've reformed that. But it does have the relational advantage that most women can find a guy of higher status, right?
Yeah.
If every woman is the secretary and every guy is the boss, then it's not hard for the woman to find a guy who's more successful than her, right? Whereas if we're a situation where in many fields, not only is it equal, but incredibly lopsided. I mean, in today, far more women graduate law degrees, medicine degrees, all of these things more than men. The only areas that are still male-dominated really are engineering, computer science, like in terms of high status, high income professions.
Yeah.
All the rest have more female graduates, and over years, as the males that are well established in those fields retire, well, they get replaced by a lot of women because there are more women in that pool. Then just the sheer maths of that equation means that women have to marry so-called down if they want to find a partner, because there simply mathematically isn't the pool of men available to achieve that. So that's the part of the equation we haven't talked about. We talk about how men have to make way for up-and-coming women and make opportunities more available for women in their careers and so forth, which is all great, and I approve of that. But we haven't talked about the relational question, which is, okay, if women want to find someone who's higher status, more educated, more successful, all of those sorts of things, and at the same time, all women are more educated, successful, etc. themselves, then women have to adjust their relationship expectation such that they look at men from a much broader pool. And that's, I don't know if that's even possible, because there's a part that's culturally inculcated and we haven't even begun to address that, but also there's a biological drive there as well. Women are, throughout eons of history, they go through periods of immense dependency. So as I've said before, women's gestation is far too short, biologically speaking, right? It's a massive biological compromise. So Homo sapiens, we have these large brains. These brains use a lot of energy, and that requires a large skull. That skull has to be born through the birth canal. And thus, and thus the baby can't spend too much time in the womb. Otherwise they get too big and the women won't survive. So they have to be squeezed out before they're ready. And as a consequence of that, the infants are massively dependent, right? They're absolutely helpless. They do nothing except, cry and make funny noises. for years and years. And that means that women are highly dependent during the pregnancy, and then for years afterwards, that relation between mother and child is absolutely one of total dependency, which means that a male figure needs to be around to provide for that. That's historically, biologically, evolutionarily what has had to happen.
So you're thinking like women in like who are reaching like 25, almost 30, have to be like, okay, have you got a partner? Like, have to really think about dating.
Well, I think even before that, you know, like
what's the ultimate dating age? What do you think? Your 20s, when you like have like people are still conceiving of who they are as a person? I don't know. Like,
I think, well, okay, so I'm speculating here. We're talking because it's not a problem that's been solved. But I find that the most successful marriages that I've seen have been people that have met each other at university, and thus they...
So that's a place, guys, the university.
I think that's the case, because the thing about university, you meet other people in your kind of category, if you like, of intellect and, you know, interest and all of that, because you meet people in your tutorials, you meet people in your lectures. So you have that in common, right? So that's good. And then it's still a level of potentiality. It's not a level of actuality. So teenage girls, for example, the reason they're attracted to the guys who play their music and ride the motorbikes and things like that is because they're perceived as having potential. They're like, okay, you don't have anything going right now. You're not running a multi-million-dollar company or anything, but I see you have talent, and that talent is something that I'm willing to invest in. Okay, now they're not thinking this through consciously. It's a natural instinct. I think at university it's that last point where that tips over. So people at university are in training for a future career, and women can identify the different guys within that kind of group who have potential, what direction they're going in, and clearly they've already got some achievement under their belt because they're at university. So there's that last moment where before the career takes off. And I think if people marry up at university, then when they go off into their careers, even if the woman proves to be slightly more successful than he does after that, they've got that sort of baseline. It's a good place to put your bets down, if you like. And so the highest probability of a long-term successful marriage, I think, is probably meeting your guy at university. And that's also when the guy is also of a similar age and not, as I said in the video, dating people in other categories. Because the guys that do become super successful, they've either met that girl at university and are married and kids and are settled down, or they're like, you know what, I'm going to date a girl who's 22. So it's there's not, like, guys don't have that restriction. They don't have to date the 35-year-old, and very few guys do. It's one of those things. The way to solve it, the only way to solve it, is for women to broaden their perspective as to who's an eligible male, to include people who have different backgrounds. So people who run small businesses and work in, on oil rigs and things like that, who aren't university educated, but nevertheless, are successful in their own, dominance hierarchy.
Yeah, I mean, like, if women become the breadwinners, there are other ways men can provide value in their life. Like my family, for instance, my dad's a wonderful cook and amazing bus driver. And that is enough. Yeah. But they met at university though, so
that's the point, right? Like, it matters after what happens then. You can't have one, like, the guy just become a complete wastrel and loser, right? He needs to be able to do something. But yeah, meeting at university is the right place, I think. For women, for guys, you've got more options, but for women, and this is the other thing. So when you ask, like, if you look at what guys see in mate selection versus women, it's wildly different. This is probably one of the biggest differences between men and women, is that men, like, for men don't think about status. Like, when it comes to the potential wives, they don't go, oh, she's a really great doctor, or she's like, a really promising political staffer, right? Like they don't, that doesn't enter their minds ever in any calculus at all. It's how attractive is she?
Yeah, my visuals.
Can I get along with her? How much does she annoy my friends? Like that's literally it. Okay. The guys are simple creatures when it comes to that. Whereas women have so much more to think about. Now they actually legitimately do because of what I talked about with the dependency, right? If you've got to utterly rely on someone for years, then sexual encounters have a much greater risk. People forget that birth control has only been around since the 60s, okay? Before that, having a sexual encounter was incredibly risky because you might fall pregnant, and then the consequences of that were enormous. So you needed all of these things in order to be persuaded that that sexual encounter was worth it. Whereas guys just don't have that issue at all. They don't have that issue socially. They don't have that issue biologically. Women are born with the only eggs they'll ever have. Guys have an endless renewable resource. It doesn't matter what they do is totally inexhaustible. And so it's not like there is this massive biological disparity when it comes to relationships, and it strongly favors women in the early 20s, right? For all this talk about how kind of victimized and oppressed women are, that's potentially true for certain groups of women. But for the most powerful people, the most powerful people in our society is the young, single, attractive woman, right? There is simply no one who has more power than they do. They have something that the guy desires that she has the power to withhold. And it's something that if it was within her capability to kind of apprehend, she can get men to do whatever she wants, right? Drive them absolutely mad, okay? And get them to do things they would never, ever, ever imagine themselves doing in any other situation, right? Women who are young and attractive and single and so forth are obscenely powerful, but that power is temporary. And if they don't capitalize on it for something more permanent, then there is a drastic cost for that. So it's just, and it goes so far the other way. Like guys in their 30s have it all. Like they just like they really do. Like it's they don't have that many societal pressures like they once did. I mean, I think men in their 40s, if they're not married and don't have children, people start to wonder why. Like people, like I think
there's something wrong with them.
Yeah. That like there does happen. There is a time on even that, but the disparity is massive. Like the guys in their kind of mid 30s are thinking about things totally differently to the way women are in their mid 30s, and the pressure is just.
Yeah, I mean, this problem is only for women who want kids. Like that's probably like
that's a big that's true.
If you don't want kids, then this does not apply. I never really thought about that, to be honest. It's not really talked about. Like, I think in my own experiences, my parents would just want to get educated, find a job, then look for a husband. Don't rush into it. But yeah, on the contrary, I don't know. Like, I don't know. Like,
it's well, and that seems to be the script, right? Like you work hard at school, get a good job, settle down, have your life set up, have your career settled down, then look around for Mr. Right. That script doesn't work for a large number of people. What you need to do is, I think, prioritize relationship and then try and find a way. And this is true for men as well. Try and find a way to make career work around that. Because it's not. It
just gets way harder as you age.
It's just tragic, so tragic for an entire generation, and we just haven't talked about the consequences. Like we don't. People are uncomfortable discussing the idea that women have to compromise in relationships.
Well, yeah, and I was when I Like, just story of your friends. Like, I do only know one woman that's above 30 and just got married and had a baby, but he married a guy that had already had kids and like an ex-wife and that kind of thing. So I was like, yeah,
exactly.
Okay, yeah, like it. But it's just very career.
I'm sure you're not saying that's like her settling. I'm sure they're very happily married.
No, very happy. Like she's a lovely guy, but I was just like, wow, like that's probably the only woman like I know that is above 30 and just got married, but it was in that exact situation.
Yeah.
So it's not like, yeah, I don't know. It's really hard for me to conceptualize because I'm in my early 20s. So like I'm not approaching that. I mean, yeah, I've got a few more years under my belt to like, quote, play.
Well, and this is actually like there are problems in Russian society. No one will question that. But one thing that's good about Russian dating approaches is that you date for a maximum of 1 year.
Yeah.
That you and when you're dating, it's not, oh, we're seeing how things go. We're happy right now. We don't have any plans. We're just spending time together. Like you're dating with an objective in mind as to whether or not you are compatible for marriage. That's the only reason you date. And you date for a maximum of 1 year, and then the guy either proposes or they break up. And the purpose of that is that she doesn't spend all her fertile years with some guy that just turns out to be a deadbeat with no plans to commit.
I like that rule for you.
But it's an embedded rule, right?
Yeah.
So it's not questioned, and it actually is highly effective and pro-social. Whereas in the West, where we have nothing matters, nothing goes, everything can happen whatever which way, you do get these guys that are in. I mean, how many people do you know have been in relationships for 7-8 years and not married? Then they break up, and she's like,
yeah. I guess that's the role of religion too. Like I know, like one thing I do like about religion, like say Christianity, is like they do prioritize family relationships, and with dating, is dating with intention always.
You're very quiet.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, talking to the mic. Yeah, they date with intention always. So it's like embedded into both the men and both men and women. So it kind of tries to take out that grey. But who knows? It's food for thought. I'm interested to know how many women are faced with that reality at the moment. You know, maybe we should coach more younger women to think about their relationships if they do plan to have kids in the future.
And that, I mean, we must be doing that. But the problem is that I don't think societally we can do that without politics, right? There is so much politics invested in, young women's career and opening opportunities and making sure that, people don't get bogged down by this stuff, and that, there'll be pushback on what I've said here, which is that, oh, you're just trying to tell women that they shouldn't have it all and that they should compromise in their relationships.
But we always make sacrifices all the time. Like, it's not.
But
good
you're
to
a logical person, Charlie. Right? You're looking at this from the perspective of pragmatism, like I am. But the people out there, there's this woke brigade out there that will think, oh, you're a misogynist, blah blah blah, for even bringing up the facts of women fertility. And I think people are afraid to talk about it. People are afraid to discuss these things because they're worried about the political consequences and social opprobrium that comes with mentioning the fact that, people have to start changing their expectations.
One thing I've been really interested lately, because I've spent more time in my house, is cleaning my house. And I came across essentialism. And that's the idea of really thinking about what's essential in your life, right? And not to have it all, essentially, because you end up stressed. Like, even the people who do have it all, are either really stressed out, don't know what they're doing in life, and feel so lost. So it's, like, the idea of having it all does bug me a bit, because, like, what does that mean? Like, and then success is such an arbitrary thing. Like, it's like, I'm just trying to think about ahead. I'm like, success is what? The car, the house, the family. Like, is that for you? Like, or is that for society as a whole? Yeah, so it's interesting, like when women are encouraged to be put in this position of, yes, you can have it all, but like with this expectation, like maybe the woman doesn't want it all. Like, you know, like I know so many women that are super happy just being mums, or like, and like being a mum is a big responsibility, and like, yeah, like I can't.
And the problem is that also that expectation, that prioritization changes. Women in their 20s who are focused on their education, on their career, will just assume that they'll have kids when the time comes, but aren't prioritizing it right now. Like if you were to ask them, oh, do you want to have a kid tomorrow? They would say, hell no. And then if you go, would you want to have a kid tomorrow or never? Right? A lot of them would say, if that's the choice, then never. Okay. But by the time they're in their early 30s, I don't know many women. As I said in the video, I know literally one who doesn't want kids.
It is a weird paradigm shift. Like because women, I can totally see the perspective of like focusing your career now and not letting the burden of having a child stop you from trying to achieve greater things. Because I don't know, was it a book leaning? I can't remember. But it was somebody said that. It's like they met a woman saying they're like, oh, I'm playing this and that, and like I don't want to go for this position because I want to have kids early, like later in life. But she was like, no, you should just go for it anyway, and then just figure it out, like as you get there. But yeah, I guess you're telling an alternate story of like it might not happen if you don't plan.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's no worse piece of advice to give someone than, oh, you'll just know, right? Like when people go, oh, how will I know I found the right person? Oh, you'll just know. Like, no.
Really? Oh, I thought, okay.
No, just get that romantic crap out of your head. You'll know when you don't have any choice.
Okay.
Right? Obviously, you want to care about them. Obviously, it has to be able to work. But there's a pragmatism to life. Life is finite. The timelines are different for men and women, and don't second guess yourself. Like 10 years in, just jump in with both feet and try and make it work. Because honestly, and this is not me recommending people stay in abusive relationships or anything like that, but just be mindful of the fact that the rules of the universe apply to you. Okay, the rules of biology apply to you. The rules of trade-offs and sacrifices apply to you.
Yeah.
And this mythos around the only thing that's required is for women to release their inner power, like the new Milan movie or Rey from Star Wars. All of that is just going to lead people to disaster. No one can have it all. We all have to make sacrifices. And I hope that the one bit of advice I said from that video that I'd really urge people to carry on, if you are approaching an age where fertility becomes potentially an issue and you're not ready to have kids yet, go get frozen, right? Like go get those eggs taken out and frozen, because that will preserve your fertility for years more, and allow you, and the fact that you've done that will also focus your attention, and mean that when you do find an appropriate relationship, you'll have more freedom of movement.
It literally is like life insurance. Unreal.
It is.
And to have the technology that's amazing. Like,
Look,
I'm grateful
I wouldn't even be that upset if it was mandatory. Like if women by the age of 29 didn't have children, that they were. I mean, I don't believe in forced medical interventions, but but strongly encouraged through various incentives to go out and do this, then, at least for a 10-year period, until, they're in their 40s and can make a final decision, maybe they get destroyed or whatever, that would be a way to manage the societal changes that we're already seeing. Because I don't think we're going to roll back the clock. I don't think we're going to get to a point where we have women in their, 19, 20 having their third child. We're not going to be in that stage ever again. we do need to change the way women look at men in their dating pool, because there just aren't the men. Like all those romance novels, they all follow the same format. Mysterious older guy with more experience and kind of a weird secret past comes along and sweeps off her feet, and they blah, blah, blah. And she's this little damsel with no experience and gets opened up to the world. Every single one of those romance books follows the same format. We need to change that paradigm. But I also think there's a biological thing here. I don't think we're going to be able to change that completely. And as a consequence of that, we need to also change the dating rules. Like that Russian thing with the 1 year, I think is a good idea to kind of minimize the problem arising out of this going forward, to make dating a more serious enterprise, that we don't have this prolonged adolescent period that goes right through into the 30s where people treat dating as a trial.
Well, they even treat marriage as a trial.
Oh my God, yeah.
It's just ridiculous. I think it was like with the internet, like you just have more choice and more variety, and like, oh, that's okay. Like we've got every app on the in every country. Like it's absolutely fine. There's always options out there, but I don't know.
But yes, do something about it. If the one takeaway is, if you're in your late 20s or early 30s and you're not ready to have a child and you're a female, consider the fertility options. Just look it up. Just do a Google search, if nothing else, okay? And that will get you thinking about it. That's all I ask.
Okay, why is the white male crossing?
I'm just misogynist, sexist.
Oh, absolutely.
Blah, blah. Cancelled. Yeah, get him off the air.
All right. Almost hitting there for time. So, final thoughts. Do you want to start?
Yes. So, Charlene has done her homework and finished the original Star Wars trilogy, which I'm deeply impressed by. Thank you, Charlene.
Oh, it was so good. Okay, so I can totally see why people are hooked, especially episode 5, which just has like everything you ever wanted.
The Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, Empire Strikes Back. So it has like the hero's journey, then it has like just romantic relationships and tension. I was living that. I was like, oh, Han Solo. And then the action. Oh, and
personal failure.
Failure, like
potential unrealized. Crisis of family.
The Force, like you actually understand what it is and contextual. Oh, it's so good. I'm so proud. I'm so proud it still holds up today. Like, and I'm grateful I watched it, right? I don't have a DVD player because who does? So he got me the DVD, and I had to wait for my brother to finish the PlayStation because that's the only thing in my house at the moment that has a CD thing. But no, it was a great experience to finally watch it and educate myself.
Yes, exactly. And so my final thoughts on this. So obviously the first one came out in the late 70s, and then I think it was 82, 83, the Return of the Jedi came out. So it was all in those few years. There was a period of time when art in the 80s and the 90s reflected the paragon of our intellectual and cultural achievements. And the other examples would be stretching back for other forms of art, the Sistine Chapel, the Statue of David, the Mona Lisa, all of these things that have happened through ages past. And I am absolutely pained to say that it is still true today, where the paragon of our achievements are intellectual, social, and cultural regression, where we have woke identity politics that have infected all of our artistic life now, where everything is about signaling and not about storytelling. I mean, the reason why Star Wars, the original Star Wars, is so powerful is, as Charlene said, the hero's journey told amazingly well. What Star Wars is at its core is an exploration of whether potential is or is not realized, how people fail, how people fall, and how people overcome these trials. Whereas the new Star Wars and so much of our artistic tradition today is about the only reason, the message being the only reason you do not realize your potential is not because you're overcoming challenges, but because you've had your inner power repressed this whole time. And all you have to do is release that inner power, and all of a sudden, all of your challenges will go away. And all the things that prevent you from realizing your potential aren't inner things, they're external things. It's the oppression of others that are preventing you from realizing your goals. And that is a nihilistic and socially destructive philosophy that is being imparted through our cultural traditions, and one thing that we need to desperately overcome. So that's my final thought for today.
Interesting. I'm just like, yeah, I haven't watched Disney movies, so I don't know yet.
Sweet mercies.
Yeah, so far I'm just enjoying the ride of the trilogy, and yeah, it did make me reflect on just how well it held up. Again, yeah, really great. Final thoughts. So, I've told the audience I'm a gym instructor, and we've had to wear our masks, right, while exercising. Now, and look like ninjas. Now, I don't understand why we have to wear a mask while exercising when we sweat and we can't breathe because we have limited capacity in terms of like oxygen. Like, it's just, I feel like it causes more harm than good, in my opinion. Especially as an instructor, I have to instruct. And I mean, they say there's exceptions for people who, are teaching, but at the same time, like if you don't wear it, you don't know what the participants are feeling. So if you go hard, you don't want them to collapse. Yeah, and I just, maybe there are masks that are like exercise friendly, but yeah, like even the paper ones, they're more breathable, but then they get like, when you're sweaty and then they get wet and you can't breathe. Oh, it's just a mess. It's a mess. And it's Australia, it's hot, and like even just walking here, like I was like, I can't breathe.
Yeah, that's one thing that our friends in the Northern Hemisphere may not realize. I remember the other night I was walking home at like 3:00 in the morning, and it was the first cool night in our entire summer. Like the rain was just starting to come down, and I was like, oh, it's such a difference when it's cool wearing this. But the Australian summer wearing a mask, I mean, that's just a suicide, really.
Yeah, like 36 degrees Celsius, something stupid and above. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm glad that it's only a few days, but still, like, it's. I feel those who have to wear a mask like all the time. Yeah,
and there'll be people in the comments down below being, "Oh God, you're complaining about masks." That's fine.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm basically an entitled person, so I totally understand. Like, I'm complaining of nothing.
Yeah. Well, it's a problem. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in and listening to us talk about all of these important and not so important issues. And if you do like this video, like and subscribe. If you are a follower of this channel, do us a favor and start sharing some of these videos. We are growing. We want to just hit those milestones as quickly as possible and try and share this around. We are starting to look at, for those that have been following us for a long time, you'll remember our old studio. We are starting to look for new studios, so that will be coming out soon, and we might even do a special on like, us building a studio or finding a different place so you can actually see what goes into creating a YouTube space, because that'll be really interesting. And otherwise, we will see you next week.
Yes. Stay safe. Yes, definitely like and subscribe if you haven't already. Any questions, any comments, please leave them down below. I want to address more questions and comments, but then they just get so lost, or you obviously address them when you reply to the comments and stuff. But like, if you have any specific questions, I know we did a response video on Iran and the US relations. So things like that would be great. And then we can make a whole video about that. But see you next time. Thanks.